Well, hey everyone. For my devotional today, I want to talk about something that might surprise you. Something that I keep in my office and I have for many years. I wanted to talk about a cereal box. And this is not just any cereal box. You can see here that it is a Wheaties box with a baseball player on it named Ken Griffey Jr. Now, if you know anything about baseball, you know that Ken Griffey Jr. is one of the best baseball players of all time. And this box is actually exactly 20 years old. I got it 20 years ago when Ken Griffey Jr. was traded to the Cincinnati Reds, who obviously I'm a big fan of. So let me give you a little backstory behind this. Let me go back to the 1999 baseball season. So in 1999, nobody expected the Reds to be that good. They were probably going to be the middle of the pack is what most people thought. But the Reds went out and they had a great season. They really blew everyone away. And they got to within one game of the playoffs. And all the Reds fans after the 1999 season were so excited because the team had really exceeded expectations and they had all these young players, and people were looking forward to the season in 2000 and beyond and thinking about how good the Cincinnati Reds were going to be. They thought that they were going to be a consistent playoff team, maybe even a World Series contending team for years to come. Well, little did Reds fans know that offseason after 1999, they were going to trade for one of the best players of all time, Ken Griffey Jr. And so in the early 2000 year, the Reds traded for Ken Griffey Jr. And of course, Reds fans were just head over heels, so excited, so stoked. I mean, I remember that I certainly was, and all Reds fans were, because they had already been excited about the past season and how good the Reds were going to be coming up. And that was just like the cherry on top. The Reds had gotten one of the best players of all time, Ken Griffey Jr., to be on the team. And people could only imagine how exciting, how fun it was going to be the next few years to be a Reds fan. Now, there's even more backstory. Not only were the Reds getting one of the best players of all time, and Ken Griffey Jr., but Ken Griffey Jr. had actually grown up in Cincinnati, and he played his high school baseball in Cincinnati. His father, Ken Griffey Sr., had been an outfielder on the Big Red Machine teams. So this was like Ken Griffey Jr. was coming home. And so that's why on this Wheaties box, you might be able to see, it says, "Welcome home, Ken Griffey Jr." So everyone, including myself, as I said, was really looking forward to Ken Griffey Jr. playing in a Cincinnati Reds uniform. They thought that the Reds surely were going to win the World Series now, and they were going to be one of the best teams in baseball for years to come. Well, unfortunately, it didn't quite work out that way. Unfortunately, Ken Griffey Jr. had one really good year for the Reds. In that 2000 baseball season, he had 40 home runs. I think he had 118 RBI, if I remember right. He won a Golden Glove. But after that, he had a series of really bad injuries. He actually missed a couple of seasons, and then he missed bits and pieces of the seasons after that. So he was never really the same player again. The Reds had signed him to a 7-year contract when they traded for him, but they ended up, towards the end of that contract, trading him away to the Chicago White Sox because he never lived up to the expectations they had for him, because he just wasn't the same player with all the injuries that he had had. Unfortunately, the Reds never made the playoffs during his years there. In fact, they didn't make the playoffs for 10 years until 2010 was when they finally made the playoffs. So it was a real letdown for Reds fans, a real disappointment. I mean, he had some good years, Ken Griffey Jr., some good seasons, but he was never the elite player that the Reds were really hoping that he would be. And the truth is that all of us have failures and disappointments in our life, just like King Griffey Jr. and the Reds did. All of us go through times where we fail, go through seasons where we're disappointed about something. Maybe we've dreamed of getting into a certain college or university. We've worked hard, we've dreamed of going there, but in the end we don't get accepted. Or perhaps there's a career and we have our career path laid out for us. We know where we want to get, we know the job we want to get, but it just doesn't work out. Maybe we can never get that job. Or maybe we get a job. It's the job we've wanted, we enjoy it, it's a perfect job for us, but then we get let go, we lose it. Or there's a ministry that we're leading at church and it doesn't go like we planned. Maybe there's a relationship and that relationship is broken. We get a divorce or we're estranged from someone. We all have these sort of disappointments, all have these sort of failures in our lives. And the question for us is, how do we respond in those times of failure? How do we respond to them? Because it's really easy for all of us in the good times to be a person of faith, a person of integrity. But what really reveals our true character, who we really are as a person, is how do we respond when the going gets tough, when we fail, when we're disappointed? Do we respond faithfully as a Christian? Or do we respond in a really negative way? Do we lose our faith? Do we start to complain? Do we start to blame others and get upset? To live a life of hopelessness? The question is, how do we respond in those times? And I think that's a perfect question for right now, because we are in a time where there's a lot of disappointment in our lives and in our country. There's a lot of difficult things going on. And we can either curse the darkness, we can either get upset and frustrated, or we can try to live faithfully, try to live as Christ wants us to live. So I invite you to consider that, to reflect on it and think about it today. In times like this, in our country and in your life, how do you respond? What sort of witness do you set for other people? Who would other people say that you are in a time like this? Think about that, and we'll talk to you soon.